Opeth, Botch, and Voivod. Another three very different bands, as always. But also, as always, three bands that I do respect and like, not just showing them because I have them. But these are bands I probably should own more albums from. But let's take a look. So we'll start with Voivod. They're a Canadian band formed in 1982. Started off as a thrash band. Their early albums you could lump in with the early extreme metals of the day. And early albums such as War and Pain, Dimension Hattress, Killing Technology. A lot of people consider these classic albums. And I like them too. But my earliest release that I have by them is several releases into their career. This is Nothing Face. This came out in 1989. And this one does have what may be their biggest hit overall, the cover of Pink Floyd's Astronomy Domini. I could always take or leave that one. But again, as always, Voivod's got unique, characteristic artwork. You always know it's them. I give this album an 8 out of 10. Not too long after that, you have Angel Rat. This is my personal favorite. It's more mellow. It's a little more experimental. But it always spoke to me. This is the one I listen to for pleasure the most. It's my go-to Voivod album. 9.5 out of 10. So after the Outer Limits in 93, two of the founding members, Blackie and Snake, they left the band, and Eric Forrest would join the band on bass and vocals. And there was an album called Negatron in 95. And I don't feel like that album gets a lot of love. I'm not all that familiar with it. It seemed very 90s. For a Canadian at the time, it seemed very Canadian. Sounds like a bad comment to say, but I just thought back in the 90s, I think a lot of countries around the world weren't taking their own bands that seriously. But the one after that, Phobos, the second and final album with Eric Forrest on vocals, a lot of people like this one, and I think it stands up in their discography as one of their best. It's on Hypnotic Records, at least I think everywhere but the US. Much heavier Voivod than we're used to. 1997. Good album, 8 out of 10. So many years would go by and the earlier members would return to the fold. And what year would this be? 2003, there was a reunion, or at least a reunion album came out in 2003. And this is the self-titled album, Voivod. A lot of people are loving it. I think it's kind of a boring album, actually. It's very straightforward, and maybe this was designed to be some basic version of classic Voivod for the longtime fans, but it never did a lot for me. A couple albums after that was Infini. I think this was right before Piggy, the guitar player, unfortunately passed away. Don't listen to this one that much, actually. And they were going to have 3 more albums after this. The most recent one being Synchro Anarchy. And the last couple albums I have just streamed once in the background. So I'm out of the loop, and I'll check them out. I saw Voivod one time. They were opening for Napalm Death. Not a big Napalm Death guy. I think I left halfway through their set. But Exhumed were also on the bill. And the thing I remember about that show was just there was some drunk guy in the crowd that became agitated with me for some reason. I think he was trying to be friendly, and he was so drunk that he took the way I looked at him the wrong way. And the guy was being kind of aggressive with me. So it kind of ruined the show. But it's no big deal. Okay, we're going to go to Botch. Hard to describe. I mean, when you look them up, first thing it says is mathcore, forgive me, but they formed in 1993, and this was their debut full-length, American Nervoso. Another Hydra Head release. Always been a big fan of that label. It's probably what made me give this band a chance. And this album is nowhere near as popular, and depending on how you ask, nowhere near as good as the following one, We Are the Romans, which is considered a classic album, one that I'm fond of. But bands like Botch are not the kind of thing I'm into anymore. That's kind of more of a thing in my 20s I was into, and you know, as my 30s have gone on, I just keep kind of digging back into the metal stuff. But We Are the Romans, I do want a copy of that. And I also have a copy of this Unifying Themes Redux, which is a collection of EPs that were all compiled onto one CD. And Botch have, I'm not sure if it's a permanent thing, but they have reunited. They've done a bunch of shows. They released a new song. Haven't looked into it yet, but if they were to play in my hometown, I'd go for sure. And I'm gonna keep an eye on what they do. Another big name, we're gonna go with Opeth. What can you say about Opeth? They are one of the biggest bands connected to metal, extreme metal. But the first album, Orchid, this was an original Candlelight release. One of their best for sure. Give this one a 9 out of 10. I'm going to say it's my second favorite Opeth album. At the time, we're talking the mid-90s, at the time, they're 10, 15, on the second album, even 20-minute songs. That was unique at the time. Melodic, black meets death metal. And right away they got pretty popular. By their second album, they had a big buzz. Morning Rise, which I don't have. And I think it's actually weaker than the albums before and after it. So that brings us to the third album, My Arms, Your Hearse. This album was huge when it came out. A bit more of a death metal influence came in. Got a couple bonus tracks on here. Hard to pick a favorite. That was one of the big albums of the late 90s for sure. Following that, Still Life, 10 out of 10 album. Don't have that one. But we come to my favorite Opeth album, Blackwater Park. Fan favorite for sure. It's got a special atmosphere. The band will never do anything as good as this. It looks like it sounds, but it's just very comfy. I always thought it was just a perfect album for hanging out in a cabin in the fall. Although it doesn't have like Halloween-y vibes or anything, it's just it's got a fall vibe for me. So after that, what did they do? Damnation and Deliverance. It was a especially heavy album for Opeth, and an all acoustic album. I don't think it was all acoustic, but mostly. And they're both good for what they are, but I don't think either one of those albums on its own stands out as one of the best albums in their discography. They both have a couple really strong songs. Skip ahead a bit. Ghost Reveries. At the time, this album kind of bored me. I just listened to it several times and racked it, but I've come around to it. Quality Opeth release. But I kind of fell off focusing on the band all that much when Watershed came out. I didn't really care. But again, I look back and it's a good album. Then Heritage came out. A lot of controversy with that. They went full prog rock. I don't like Heritage. But then I thought they got progressively a little bit better to the modern day. The second prog rock album was this one, Pale Communion. I don't love it, but again, it was better than Heritage. And the one following this, Sorceress, was another step up from Pale Communion, and their most recent album, 2019's Incada Venenum. That's the best thing they've done in a long time. Still predominantly a prog rock thing, but the metal touches are back. There were no songs that I hated. I was happy to see it. And I've never seen Opeth live. I've never been all that interested in going to see them. But you know, one day the time and place will be right. I'll check it out. And I have one more thing to show. That is Storm Corrosion. This was a project that Michael from Opeth did with Steven Wilson from Porcupine Tree. Came out around the same time as Pale Communion. And I don't know much to say about this album. Just like the band, like the members, it's Opeth, prog era meets Porcupine Tree, and a little sparse. Not really into this one, but that's it. Opeth, Botch, Voivod. Thanks for watching.